In UFO literature, there are cases of people reportedly shooting at UFOs. One of the more interesting cases I found happened in Anza, California. This was in one of George Filer's books. A young man named Jack claims he shot at an object while out hunting. It was 1956. Jack's parents owned a small piece of desert property near Anza, California. He spent a great deal of his time hunting for rabbits and other varmints with his .22. He recalled that on that day, he had gone down to a riverbed looking for something to shoot. That is when he heard a noise. He turned to see what it was and quickly received the shock of his life. I saw a disc in the manzanita brush, just hovering about a foot off the ground. It scared the hell out of me at first, and I shot at it with my .22 rifle. Probably not the thing to do. There was no effect, and I fell on my butt, trying to get back away from it. When I fell, I was only 3 feet from the disc, so I know what I was looking at. After a few seconds of staring at it, the object rose up about 20 feet and shot away at a tremendous speed. Jack described the object as 8 feet across and 3.5 feet high, kind of small. He noted that there was no insignia on the object, and at no point did he observe the vehicle's occupants. After the object left, he immediately ran back to the family's cabin and told his parents. The only reason that they believed my story, I was shaking like a leaf in a windstorm. Later, my stepfather and I went back to the spot and found some small prints about 4 inches in length and a manzanita branch that was burned on one end. I never went back to that spot again and did not report it to anybody else. I did not want to sound like some of the locals that reported men from Mars. I was 13 at the time and remember it like it was yesterday. It did convince me that UFOs were real. Many people who claim that they have been abducted by aliens often describe seeing either a blinding white light or a blinding blue light, followed by an almost immediate loss of consciousness. It's almost as if the light has hypnotized the witness into a type of catatonic state, allowing the beings to carry out their intended experiments or procedures. In May 1985, a witness recalled a terrifying experience she had with her mother while traveling to a dinner party in California City, California. Even though she was only 6 years old at the time of the event, she remembers it quite vividly, and to this day has no explanation for what they encountered. It was still daylight out, and they were passing over the Trona train tracks when they were engulfed by a blinding white light. The light was accompanied by a powerful, roaring noise. I thought I was going to die from being hit by a train was my first reaction, until I realized I wasn't dead, but could see nothing but the white light everywhere, and the roaring noise was so loud, I blacked out as everything disappeared. The witness claims the light was so bright that it was like 50 suns. I could not see my mom or my hand in my face. The whole car and everything around me disappeared in a flash of light and noise. When the witness woke, it was now dark. She was in the passenger seat and the door was hanging open. I was sitting in the passenger seat in my mom's Camaro, and all the lights were blinking as well as the radio was going in and out. We were stopped on the other side of the tracks, on the right side of the road. My mom was sitting in the driver's seat with a blank stare on her face, with her eyes open and not moving. She remained like this for several minutes, and then came to screaming and yelling. She grabbed me by my shirt and violently shook me, screaming, "Are you all right?" over and over again. I responded I was okay, closed my car door, and we drove off. At no point did the witness or her mother observe an object, but there was missing time. She believes that they were taken, and that the object had already departed by the time they woke up. In San Antonio, a security guard named Gene, no last name was provided, experienced missing time, even though he doesn't recall ever seeing a UFO. He was on shift, working night security at a news station when something bizarre happened. I was working the late shift downtown, 11 o'clock. I was doing my paperwork, returning to the news station I was guarding. I wrote down 2300, and that's the last thing I remember, except coming to, walking down a highway at 4 in the morning. A lady and her son stopped and picked me up. I had no idea where I was, and they drove me to a convenience store. I called my son and he came and picked me up. It took him about an hour to get there. I had like 5 hours of missing time. Gene claims that when he returned home, he slept for about a day and a half. When he woke, he realized that his legs and arms were covered in bruises. Even stranger, his uniform was clean, almost as if the uniform was removed at some point and then put back on. I had bruises all over my legs and all my arms. My uniform was perfectly clean, so I didn't fall down or anything. I had no idea how I got way out there. It was just weird. It took me a week to find my pickup truck. I had to call the sheriff's office to get them to track it down, and it was parked on the side of the highway just perfectly. Not a scratch on it. I didn't wreck it or anything, and it never happened again. When I found my truck, my weapon, gun belt, everything was in the truck. I never take it off until I get home. My wallet, everything else was in the truck. Nothing was on me, and my shirt was untucked. My boots were untied. It's just crazy. I was just wandering down the highway. When telling his story to radio host Clyde Lewis, Glenn admitted that he's never seen a UFO or had anything else strange happen to him, though this one has always bothered him. His last memory was filling out paperwork at his desk. He has no memory of getting into his truck and leaving the station or what happened on the highway. It's almost as if Glenn was being controlled, and everything that happened between filling out the paperwork and waking up at 4 a.m., walking down the highway, was being done on a type of autopilot. In Bonaire, Georgia, on August 5, 2006, 3 men out hunting hogs were making their way across an open clearing with their dogs when they noticed a light coming from the woods. It was around 11 p.m., quite dark, so the odd light was quite noticeable. They decided to investigate, walking into the forest approximately 60 yards. As they got closer, they began to hear a loud whooshing sound. Their dogs almost instantly reacted, tucking their tails and whining. When the men tried to get a closer look, the lights dimmed through the trees and emitted another loud whooshing sound. Although a little spooked, the 3 men inched their way through the woods, getting closer. They could make out an object which was sitting in the forest. They likened it to a large concrete mixer with lights on it. As they stood looking at the object, they suddenly observed, in their words, 2 small green midgets run from behind a tree back to the object. This frightened the men, who tore off through the woods back to their camp. Upon arriving back at camp, and after much heated debate and at least 1 beer, the witness was adamant that they had only drank 1 beer each and definitely were not inebriated, just excited. They managed to work up the courage to go back into the woods and check to see if the green men were still there. When they got back to the spot in the forest where they had observed the craft, it was now gone. They noted that while they were in the woods, there was a strange, eerie silence. Even the insects were quiet. After looking around, they eventually made their way back to camp. The next morning they went back to the spot, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Curiously, at least one of the dogs that was with the men on that night fell ill and died later in the week. On August 31st, 2006, near Richmond, Virginia, a person out driving in a heavy rain observed something bizarre. At the time, Tropical Storm Ernesto was ravaging the area. The driver recalled that there was a small break in the rain, and he could see another car far ahead of him. There were 2 other cars coming towards him in the distance. After the car ahead of him passed a gap between a couple of houses and some bushes, that is when he caught sight of what he described as a strange, human-like figure rushing across the road. He was only going about 35 miles per hour, so he got a decent look at the person. Now here's the weird part. He could see through him. The cars on the opposite side of the road, coming in his direction, were visible through this figure. The witness claims the only reason he could see it was because the sheets of water were hitting it, and its body created a type of gap in the rain. Also, his headlights shone off the rain hitting it. To him, it appeared to be almost cloaked, similar to the type of cloaking mechanism the alien used in the movie Predator. He watched the entity as it crossed the road, but at some point it seemed to completely vanish, as he could no longer see it or the rain falling off of it.